privileges. All right, starting with committee members. Laura Barheit.
Here.
Is Amy Bunk here?
Right. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great. Stephanie Davis.
Here.
Bill Funk.
Here.
Alex Goodenough.
Here.
It looks like I saw Michael Hertz.
I'm here.
Great. Nina Mendelson.
Here.
Thank you. Mitch Plave.
Here.
Great. Daniel Weiss.
Here.
Great. And I know Kevin Stack was a late RCP.
Here.
Great. Am I missing any committee members?
Yes, Lon Smith, I'm here.
Oh yeah, Lon, thanks, sorry.
And Jessica Stone.
All right, Jessica, thanks. Anyone else on the committee? All right, non-committee members. I saw, all right, did I see, is Jeff Lubbers here? Matt Weiner. All right, I know Ron Levin is here.
I'm
Ron,
here.
did you say here? Thanks. And forgive me, did I miss, are there any ACUS members who are not on the committee who are present? Going once? All right. And then, of course, I see Bertrall, our committee chair, and then Mark, our consultant, back again. And I think, unless, did I miss anybody else? I'll turn it over to Bertrall.
All right, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Mark, for being here again. I know you didn't sign up for 4 meetings, but I appreciate you seeing it out. So I'll start with the script. Please note that only ACUS members, including government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee and their designated alternates, have full speaking privileges. To avoid background noise, though, I ask that you keep your microphone on mute and either use Zoom's hand raise feature or add a comment in the chat feature if you'd like to speak. I'll then call on you and you can unmute yourself. Please then remute yourself when you're done. I also ask that ACUS members and their designated alternates use the webcam to facilitate conversation. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternates, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points, and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. If any such participant would like to speak, please so indicate in the chat feature or by using Zoom's hand raise feature and wait to speak until I call on you. You can then unmute yourself and please remute yourself when you're done speaking. For all participants, please use the chat feature only to indicate that you'd like to speak, or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. Please do not hold any sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. Only members of the Committee on Rulemaking, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels have a vote. Please do not vote unless you're a member of the committee. We have a list of committee members in case you're unsure. Okay, so what we're going to do in this committee, since this is our last meeting, we don't have a lot of time and we can't afford to get bogged down, is we're going to just focus on the big picture questions and we're going to avoid any wordsmithing. We're going to leave it to ACUS staff to work out the change in the wording in light of the comments that are made here. What I'll generally try to do is if there's a comment or a proposal for changing something, we'll try to come to consensus as to what that big picture change might look like. And I'll ask for objections. Just for purposes of efficiency, I ask that comments be kept as short as possible so that we can have as much discussion as possible and be able to get through all the committee, all the recommendations. We're going to have to work through the rest of the recommendations and the preamble. Instead of going, we'll try to do the preamble in bigger chunks than we normally do in hopes of working through all of this before the end of the committee session. Okay. Are there any questions before we move forward? Okay. So where we left off was, I believe, hold up, I have to pull up my own script. Okay. And so could you scroll up? Is this DFR right here?
Yeah, and so as I mentioned in the meeting to the members, we've done some kind of substantial streamlining of the document to reflect the committee discussion. I know we stopped in direct final rulemaking somewhere, but the draft has changed a little bit. So I mean, I'll leave it to you about whether you want to just kind of jump back in at the beginning or whether you want That's up to
Okay,
you.
sounds good. Let's just start with DFR, and we'll work through recommendation 1, and see if there are any comments or objections to recommendation 1 as it now stands. Michael.
So this counts as a big picture question, and it goes to the line 69 and also line 117, the equivalent line at the beginning of the interim final rulemaking. And it's something that's come up a little bit. Have we reached a final definitive conclusion as a committee, whether we want to say anytime the good cause exception applies, an agency should use DFR or IFR, or are we open to the idea or want to explicitly acknowledge the possibility of invoking the good cause exception and not issuing a direct final rule and not issuing an interim final rule? So that seems to me a fundamental issue. The way I read current 69 and 117, it says anytime that the good cause exception is invoked, the agency should either do DFR and IFR or IFR. Should, not must, but still should. Personally, I'm just not sure that's right, but I'm not a hill I would die on. Ron was saying at the last meeting that that seems essentially right. I don't want to misstate Ron's views, but that seems essentially right, and that the old recommendation said that. But I just think it's important that as a committee, we just sort of confront that issue and make sure the whole recommendation is consistent with whatever position it is we end up on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And I think it is a big picture thing that we should address at the very beginning. Yes, Jeff.
The alternative would be, of course, should consider.
Okay, so that adds a modifier that gives the agency the opening, if it chooses otherwise, to apply another procedure. Daniel.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't seem to fit with the title of this, which is public engagement, to say that an agency should basically avoid the notice and comment process, even if they have time to do it, because it's unnecessary and unlikely to elicit significant adverse comments. If the agency has time to do it and wants to do it, shouldn't we be saying that they should do the process that allows for maximum notice and comment?
So, yes, Bill.
Well, just to address Daniel's point there, I thought we got past the point of saying that no, if it's unnecessary, and if everybody agrees it's unnecessary to have, because it's such a technical, typographical change, that we don't want people to do notice and comment rulemaking. That's just a waste of government money. So maximizing notice and comment rulemaking when it's unnecessary or contrary to the public interest, I mean, I'm with, I think Michael Hertz on this, is that no, you don't want to do notice and comment there. And so that'd be my response to that. In terms of the big picture item, I liked the fact that in the last draft, there was an actual acknowledgement that there are times when you shouldn't do either direct final rulemaking or interim final rulemaking, that it was just, this is it, and that's the end, and that's appropriate in certain circumstances. So I like that in terms of the big picture items.
Okay. Daniel.
Right. So I guess that gets to the question of what is our goal here primarily to promote government efficiency, or is it to encourage agencies to engage in maximum public engagement, notice and comment, even when that's inefficient, because that's better to involve the public if the agency has time to do it, even though the agency thinks efficiency wise it's a waste of time, that it's unnecessary and they're not going to get significant adverse comments. So is the goal here to update the prior recommendation, or is it to change it to say that public engagement is more important than efficiency?
Yeah, that's a big picture question that we should be addressing here. Thank you for raising it, Daniel. Ron? Are you there,
Since
Ron?
Michael mentioned my name, I think I should say explicitly, I have no preference here, and the committee should do as it thinks best. But I do want to clarify an issue. There are two points that are getting blurred together, I think. One is whether notice and comment is unnecessary. Well, you wouldn't be doing direct final rulemaking unless you thought that that notice and comment is unnecessary in the sense that is described in the preamble. The other question is might it be unnecessary even to do direct final rulemaking? If you're so confident that nothing could come of giving people the chance to say you're wrong, then you could say, we'll skip that too. But if you think, well, I'm 90% sure I'm right, but somebody might have a reason for us to hold a notice of comment ruling. I mean, let's find out. Then you should go ahead with the process. So are there rules in the former category? I think that's for the committee to decide. But I think probably the way to approach it, if you want that kind of flexibility, is not say should consider, but give a little more direction by saying you should use direct final rulemaking unless you determine that it would not be helpful, beneficial, illuminating, something like that.
Right. Okay, so let's kind of think about these all holistically. So we have direct final rulemaking. These are instances, I think, where we're trying to focus on the committee, the agency finds it is unnecessary, right? They make that finding, right? Or it's impracticable or contrary to public interest, right? And we just put here that you should proceed with direct final rulemaking or interim final rulemaking. But then there, if we go down the line 146, if you could scroll down, Ben, we have a move for supplemental public engagement, which is trying to which provides sort of other forms of public engagement, which is trying to accord with the theme and the orientation of this recommendation, as Daniel points out. So I don't know if this makes up for the deficit that people find with respect to the recommendations on direct final rulemaking or interim final rulemaking or not, but that's something that we should consider looking at it entirely. Ron.
Yeah, I'm sorry to speak again, but I just found the language I was looking for before in 95.4, which addresses this point in the preamble. And it says, because the process protects public comment and expedites routine rulemaking, the administrative conference recommends that agencies use direct final rulemaking in all cases where the unnecessary prong of the good cause exemption is available, unless the agency determines that the process would not expedite issuance of such rules. That's preamble language. It's not in the recommendation proper, but one option would be simply to adopt that language as opposed to the other phrases we were tossing around before. And at least it has the dignity of having stood as a conference pronouncement of sort for some years.
Okay. And that suggestion would be to have it in the recommendation itself rather than just in the preamble.
I think that would be the implicit implication, yes.
Okay.
Or you can put in the preamble if that's what you want.
Okay. Other comments on this point? Yes, Michael.
I mean, for what it's worth, I'd be totally fine with that. I think that I think the critical thing is to acknowledge explicitly the possibility of doing neither DFR or IFR, that there'll be some circumstances where, sound administration would involve doing neither. And as written now, the implication is you've got to do one or the other, period. And just going back to Daniel's point, efficiency versus engagement, there are other variables too, of course. It doesn't come down just to that. But, if you're going to ask me, do I want to maximize public engagement over all other values? Actually, no, I don't. Sometimes, public engagement is a value, but it can be outweighed by other considerations. And the benefits are often pretty meager or non-existent and may even be counterproductive. So I think that Ron's suggestion is an elegant one and kind of Burkean and reassuring in that way.
And so Ron, just come back to you, Ron, that language was borrowed directly from 95.4. Is that right?
I was reading from 95.4 preamble. Do you want me to read it to you again?
or just which lines it was, so we could just kind of draw from
It's
it.
not
We need-
numbered on the copy
Oh,
that I have.
sorry.
It's in the fifth paragraph.
Fifth paragraph. Okay, we'll draw it from there. If people agree with that. Nina.
Yeah, I think to the points that have been made earlier, it makes sense to acknowledge in the preamble that maybe there are some instances when the agency shouldn't always be conducting notice and comment rulemaking. But I wonder, to Daniel's point, if we could add the word rare in the preamble language, in the rare instance where, notice and comment would not appropriately expedite the rule. I don't recall precisely the language, or I'm not sure. I prefer the 95.4 preamble language to any reference to sound administration. To me, that seems like just an exception that could swallow the rule. But it is fair to say that these devices are being used in lots and lots of instances, and the agencies are somewhat sloppy in how they handle the public comments. So I think it makes sense to say, yeah, there could be a time when you don't use either of these tools, but it should be the rare instance.
Okay, and so that would just be for the preamble language, Nina. You wouldn't add it anywhere in the recommendation. Am I capturing you correctly?
I wouldn't object to putting it in the recommendation, but I think it's also fine to put it in the preamble.
Okay, thank you. Bill.
I'm fine with preamble too. I just wanted to clarify what Nina said, because at first I thought she was saying it should be rare when people don't use notice and comment. And I would disagree with that. But if you say it's rare that they wouldn't do direct final rulemaking or interim final rulemaking, then I would agree with that.
Sorry, sloppy early morning phrasing. Rare non-use of direct final and interim final rulemaking.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have the spirit. So I just want to get a pulse of the committee. Would anyone object to putting the suggested language that Ron has cited from DF 95.4 into the recommendation itself?
I was proposing that we use the add some reference to rare into that language.
Yeah, I'm getting both of them. I'm gonna get both of them.
Okay,
I'm
in
gonna
the
start with
rare.
Ron's yours is a modification on Ron's?
Yeah, I think in
okay.
the rare instance in which the agency determines
Okay.
something
Ron,
like that. How do you
do you
feel
take-
about that, Ron?
Yeah, do you take that as a friendly amendment or do you object?
I would not do that, but I'm not a mover, so I can't treat it as friendly or otherwise.
Okay,
in
yeah,
the
that's true.
parliamentary
Fair.
sense.
Fair.
I think we're dealing with such marginal cases anyway. Adding another qualifier is not something I personally would do.
Okay. All right, so we have the proposed language now. Let's see. Does anyone object to language in C that's a member of the committee? In D, oh, except in D. Sorry, thank you. C and D, which incorporates Nina's language.
Just throwing out some options for folks to look at.
Yeah. Are those in the alternative or those both? We would adopt both.
No, I think we would select one.
One of two. That's what I thought. Okay. So Bill.
I like the except in the rare instance that an agency determines. I think that's a good introduction. That'd be in place of what's at one. An agency should use it. The right goes up to one, and I think that's
okay. Okay.
And I'll move that as a committee member.
Okay, so that's the proposal in terms of changing, moving the language that Nina proposed up to one as the sort of preamble for his recommendation. Are there any objections to that change? Okay. Okay, we'll move forward, and we may make a similar change with respect to the intro to the IFR. Okay, so let's go to recommendation number 2. Bill.
Yeah, in let's see, I've lost it here. In D, line 82, where it says provided a period of at least 30 days during which interested persons may submit adverse comments.
Okay.
We don't want general comments.
Okay. Adverse comments, okay. Any objection to that change?
Yeah, I just want to know that one of the things that we did do, we had a discussion at the last committee meeting about kind of the dual purposes of, both of these types of rulemakings, DFRs and IFRs, is that it's to elicit comment on whether the good cause exemption applies, and then to elicit comment on the substance of the rule itself. And so a lot of that is incorporated into this draft. But Bill, I take your amendment to be kind of focusing more on the existence of adverse comments, so, whether there are significant adverse comments, which goes to maybe both, but I'm not sure.
Michael.
Sorry, but and I don't want to get hung up on things, but this one doesn't make sense to me, Bill, because surely you're not saying that only adverse comments would be accepted, right? I mean, it's a period during which people can comment. The reason you're doing that is to make sure there are no significant adverse comments, but all this says is you provide a comment period.
Well, my original change to this would have been to say provide an opportunity for persons to provide adverse comments. Because that's what we want. We're not looking for, we don't want to receive comments that say this is a good idea, or maybe it would be a little better if you did this, but I can accept it. I mean, you want adverse comments. If they have them, we don't want them, and so an opportunity for was what I was originally proposed, but I was trying to make the most minor editorial change here.
Okay, so I guess the point would be in terms of, do we take out, regarding the substance of the rule, because it wouldn't be an adverse comment regarding that. It would be an adverse comment regarding whether notice of comment rulemaking is unnecessary. Is that correct?
Well, no. I mean, if somebody thinks the substance of the rule, there's something wrong with it. The rule's bad, right? That's
the whole point.
That's an adverse comment, right? Okay. If somebody says, well, I just think you ought to do notice and comment rulemaking because notice and comment rulemaking is a good thing, I guess that's an adverse comment, but I wouldn't call it significant at that point.
Okay. Nina? Nina, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm not sure why we need to specify any of this. Why couldn't we just end the little d after the word comments on line 83, just adverse comments? Because they could be on all kinds of things, including an agency's use of a private standard without publishing it.
Okay. So Nina's proposal is to end the ND
just
after
adverse comments.
After adverse comments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any objection to that change? Ron?
Yeah, that's not the purpose of this solicitation. It's to find out whether there should be a notice and comment proceeding. And so all you really want to know is, does anybody object to doing this right away? And you don't want the agency to get bogged down in debate about whether the substantive rules are right or wrong. You just want to know if there's opposition. Now, I think deleting adverse would be okay because it's innocuous, and if people want to submit some favorable comment, that's fine. But really, the only purpose is to find if there's opposition so that you can decide whether to go forward with either the companion NPRM or a subsequent one. And so I don't think we should be debating at all substantive issues of the kind that Nina raised, even if Nina's position is quite wise. There are people who don't agree, and this is not the time for the agency to engage in that discussion.
So with D, I know you're not a member of the committee, but would that suggest that so would you suggest that we include the language that Nina suggests deleting, suggest including all of the language that Nina suggested deleting?
I would, I guess, I would unstrike it.
Okay. Entirely?
Yeah, I guess. So I think the only question is whether to use the word adverse. And even though it's contrary to my basic argument a minute ago, if someone submits a favorable one, okay. It isn't really what we were looking for, but if you don't like that negative message of saying we only want to hear one side, then all right, then you could strike adverse. But really, you're looking for questions of whether it should not be adopted through direct file rulemaking, and I'm not sure whether the deleted language gets at that sufficiently or not.
Okay. So we have two proposals still on the board. Bill suggesting that we add adverse, and then Nina suggesting that we delete all that comes after comments. And we've heard suggestions and objections to both. Bill, do you have?
I can live with Nina's deletion to sort of eliminate arguments about what the adverse comments are about. I still think it's important to put in adverse comments because that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for any other kind of comments. If they submit them anyway, so what? But I mean, we should identify that's what we're looking for.
Okay. All right. So we have adverse comments. Kevin.
Yeah, I guess I'm just coming back to, I realize that the point of this is to, the point of this is to identify comments that might pose an objection. But I just worry that adverse comments, like if you have if you have any problem with any aspect of the direct final rule, you have an adverse comment, right? In this sense, I guess the possibility, don't want to bog us down at all, would be to elaborate. I guess I'd be happy without the adverse comments because people know that the comments that matter at this point are ones that pose some sort of objection. But I wonder whether we should elaborate then. Should we say may submit comments which, anyway, I don't want to muddy the waters here, but
right. So you just want to make sure that people know that adverse comments is not too narrowly defined, that a comment could be objecting to the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be happy without adverse, but I'm definitely not a significant issue for me.
Okay. Okay, so for anyone that has objection, strong or otherwise, to including the language adverse. Yes, Ron.
Well, you should be aware that elsewhere, adverse is defined broadly enough to include a rule that is assertively under-inclusive and should be stronger. That is adverse within the meaning of the recommendation. But maybe what you want to do is to strike only the words regarding the substance of the rule and ask for comments, adverse or otherwise, about the agency's finding that notice and comment is unnecessary, because that I think should be the focus. And someone will sneak something in about the substance, okay, but that is not what you're not inviting substantive debate. You may get it, but really the issue is notice and comment unnecessary?
Yeah, my instinct accorded with Ron, and I know that Bill objected to that idea because, but I would sort of put my, I guess, thumb on the scale with Ron's comments. Stephanie.
Sure, thank you. Being someone who just recently went through and is actually still going through a comment period and feedback set with our client population, who tend to be people living at less than 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. So we're working with my agency serves underserved people. My concern here would be if you say adverse or find some way to limit the comments, that may serve to suggest to some people that they shouldn't comment at all. And I hear what the committee is saying about preferring to have the term adverse in there. I would be comfortable with that, including adverse and the finding that notice and comment rulemaking is unnecessary, without having regarding the substance of the rule language, because I just, to the extent that these are visible by anyone, I would not want to discourage comment or write something in a way that discourages comment.
Right.
Participation.
Okay, so there's an alternative proposal that's on the board. So we have adverse comment, full stop, adverse comment regarding all of the stuff after that's struck out. And then there's adverse comment regarding the agency's finding that notice and comment rulemaking is unnecessary. Bill.
Yeah, I'd like to try to make a compromise suggestion, delete adverse and have it may submit comments objecting to the agency's finding that notice and comment rulemaking is unnecessary.
Okay, I like that. So take away adverse and then comments objecting to the agency's finding. I could get on board. I'm on board with that suggestion. Nina.
Yeah, me too. I like that suggestion from Bill. I think the challenge here is that what we really want is for the agency to be open to all sorts of comments that might cause it to revisit its conclusion that notice and comment rulemaking was unnecessary. And so my worry is that if we start specifying what kind of comments they have to be, that will end up being limiting in the way that Stephanie identified. So, I would kind of like to say including comments regarding the substance of the rule, period, because that perhaps should cause an agency to reconsider its conclusion that notice and comment rulemaking was unnecessary. So then it would read, objecting to the agency's finding that notice and comment rulemaking is unnecessary, including comments regarding the substance of the rule.
Thanks, Nina. Ron.
So I wouldn't go with that for the reason I stated before, but I on the other point about objecting to the finding, let me take you back in history to 95-4 when it was looking at the original EPA version, which would call off the direct final rule if there was any objection. You wouldn't have to say why, you just object. And the committee decided that they need a qualifier, like significant adverse comments there, because they were afraid of obstructionists who just don't like the agency, and so they object to whatever they do, because in these days, believe it or not, there are people who are kind of negative on government, and they might just object for no particular reason at all. And so you would want to give the agency some opportunity to say, this doesn't rise to the level of a serious objection. There was a study by Brookings recently which found that there are a lot of such objections which do get filtered out under this type of language.
Yeah.
So I do think you want some kind of qualifier here.
Ron, can I just sort of intervene right here? Does E address your concern? Because it does give the agency the discretion to differentiate between, comments that are not significantly adverse and those that are.
Well, you want them to be compatible, but are complementary. So I wonder if you're giving mixed signals if D is not correlated with E. I mean, maybe not, but I think if E is all you're looking for, then maybe D should indicate that when you provide the period, you say what you're looking for, i.e. what's in E.
Okay.
So I think comments may submit significant adverse comments indicating regarding whether notice of comment is unnecessary. Probably covers that. What you need, I think, or take out. How about just comment? Well, I don't know. I mean, I respect Stephanie's point, so maybe adverse alone sends the wrong message. But that was my concern. I think you should at least keep in mind what the thinking was of the committee.
Sure.
95.
Yeah, sure. And so there's a distinct possibility that the agency gets flooded with a lot of comments that are not significantly adverse comments. And the question is whether we're comfortable with E and allowing agencies to weed out those and differentiate between those two types of comments and making a decision as to whether direct final rulemaking is, or whether notice of comment rulemaking is unnecessary. Bill.
Well, I'm happy to let E do the work on that point. And referring back to your introductory language that we shouldn't try wordsmithing everything. We aren't going to get through this all.
Sure.
I just, I'd like to move on. It's just not that important one way or the other. I think it's we shouldn't be generally asking for comments, period. All right. Because what we want to know is, should we do notice and comment rulemaking? Mm-hmm. And that's the issue. And any number of phrasings can do that. And I'm happy with the way it is, but.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder, Bill. Okay. So let's stick with this language. We have your considerations in mind. We'll make additional modifications as we think might be appropriate in light of the concerns that are raised here. And we have the tape to roll to get to it. So let's move on to see if there are any other comments with respect to recommendation 2, A through G. Jeff.
Yes, I have a comment on F.
Okay.
It says
Can
or
we do E?
What?
Yeah, we could do E, or we're doing all A through F. Do you want to sort of start with?
If
I
someone
think
wants to
F
do
is
E first,
complicated. E is simple, and it just says specifies any additional actions that the agency will take. Well, they may not know at that point what they will do. First, they haven't seen what the input is. So maybe they should say may take.
Okay. Okay, so I accept that and offer that as a proposal for the change in E. We'll come back to you, Jeff, on F. So changing the line 89, I propose that we change from will to may.
Or will consider taking.
Or will consider taking. Okay. Comments directly on E. And I'll come back to you, Jeff, on F. Lon.
I actually had one on F, but don't you have to change the first will on E too?
Explains agencies may withdraw the final rule if it receives any significant. Agency may take.
No, I guess maybe that should stay the same. My comment was on F anyway, but I'll let Jeff go first.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, so it says or alternatively in F, but I don't really think it's an alternative because the second action, well, even if the agency does the second thing, it will still have to specify when the rule will take effect. So I would do something like maybe add at the end of the second part, at which time the agency will announce the rule's effective date.
Okay, so where does that
at the end?
Where does that come in right at the end, Jeff, on line 93?
Yes.
Okay, and repeat that language again for us.
At which time the agency will announce the rule's effective date.
Okay.
Because either way, they're going to have to announce the effective date. Either they can do it, in their original notice or in their subsequent notice.
Okay. Daniel?
So I just want to point out that this looks like a rollback of the recommendations that we previously had on direct final rulemaking and more narrowly tailored type of comments that we'll seek. So I just want to make sure that that's our intent, because the title of this is public engagement, but it seems like we're actually being more efficient and rolling back unnecessary comments. And as a government lawyer with few resources, that's fine. We'll use this to seek fewer comments than we did before. I just want to make sure that that's the intent, since the title of this suggests the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's trying to sort of specify a deadline for when the rule will take effect. And so how does that roll back on prior recommendation?
I mean, just this whole section, because before we said agencies should develop a process for direct final rulemaking, they should seek comments. Now we're saying they should use direct final rulemaking and only seek comments objecting to notice and comment, to the finding that notice and comment is unnecessary, which seems much more narrowly tailored than our previous recommendation. I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, because that will narrow the sorts of comments we seek. It just seems opposite to the title of what this document is.
Okay, so as a general comment on recommendation 2, got it. Amy.
I just want to comment on Jeff's language, because I'm not sure that will. I think the Federal Register may object to not necessarily having a effective date in your direct final rule. So maybe at which time the agency will confirm the rule's effective date instead of announce. I think the problem might be with the word announce.
Okay. So
well, then the problem is we have why do we frame them as alternatives? I mean, if they're supposed to do it in their original notice,
So if we took out the, can we take out the language? What is it?
They seem to
Yeah.
be two separate rules.
They seem to be two separate rules. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Lon?
yeah, I agree with Jeff. They're not alternatives. They just seem to be two separate rules.
Okay, so let's switch. Let's separate out F, and then take out or alternatively, and then start G, new G, which specifies on line 91.
And then determine whether the new G is what you want.
And it's determined with the new G is what we want exactly. So check 91 through current 91 through 94, move to G, starting at specifies in 91. After alternatively. Oh, no, not that one.
So sorry, you want the beginning of current F to go down to G?
No, we
Yeah,
want
you
the specifies after alternatively in current F.
Right. Right, you want to take
G.
alternatively out and just have a separate specifies.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Are we keeping Jeff's language about the effective date?
For now, and taking out alternatively, exactly, and we'll see. Okay, so now we have them separated out.
Right,
Okay.
now you want to see whether or not you need Jeff's language at the end there.
Okay. All right, so Amy, is your hand still up on, or is, okay, Ron?
Yeah, I have a somewhat different approach to this, and let me lay out the conceptual level first and see if people agree, and if so, I have some language that I think could get us there. It seems to me that what's being overlooked here is that there are really two target dates, and we should not say the one is the same as the other. One is the date on which the agency decides that it's going to stand by the rule because it did not receive adverse comment, a significant adverse comment. And on that date, either it should issue a confirmation notice saying that, or the original rule should say, if you don't hear from us by X date, assume that we decided to stand by the rule. That, I would say, should not be the same as the effective date, by which I mean the date on which people are required to comply. Amy can maybe second guess my diction, that may be fine. But in concept, that should be different because under Section 553D of the APA, you need to leave 30 days between when you have finally adopted the rule and compliance date. When I say finally adopted, I mean it survives the objection period. And so you decide it survived, and then you get 30 days or more. And we should not say the one is the same as the other, because if you say that it becomes effective at the end of the comment period, then you're really giving the agency no time whatever to deliberate about whether the comments they received are significant adverse or not. They have to get to it overnight, and they have to decide how significant the objection is. You need to leave time for them to think about that point.
Right.
And so mushing it all into a single single deadline, I think is problematic. And let me throw that concept out in general to see if people agree. If so, I can give you some language that would get there.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Ron.
I should also, that would also give a time for appeal if you want to appeal. You know when it's been adopted, and that's the date. That could be the date on which you appeal.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Daniel.
Yeah, I think if we break out F and G, we're adding a big burden for agencies to now have to publish yet another notice after direct final rulemaking. Whereas before you could just say in the notice that if you receive no significant adverse comments, it takes effect and you're done. If G is separate, you now have to publish, if I'm understanding this, yet another notice saying you didn't receive significant adverse comments. And that would be, that would be a burden if that's what we're saying by breaking out F and G.
That was not my intent.
Yeah.
I
guess-
you should be able to say in your original notice that you're constructively on notice that happened if you don't hear from us by a certain date. I don't want to add to the burden at all.
Isn't that what G does now though? Because it says, we had and there before, that you also had to then say in a subsequent notice that you didn't get significant adverse comments.
Well, I'm not talking about his language, but I'm saying in concept, you should be able to do that in the original date by just saying, okay, we figure it'll take us 20 days to process whatever we received. So 50 days after the date we published the original notice is the date on which you have constructive notice that we're standing by it. No additional burden, whatever. But then you have until the 80th day to comply with it under those circumstances.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second and see if there's a committee member that's willing to embrace the conceptual approach that Ron has put forth as a starting point. Nina, I'll go to you first because
Sorry, I put my hand up and I waved my hand. Bill, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the same point. I don't want to jump the queue.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think Ron is raising a really important point that was flagged in comments before we started all these committee meetings, which is uncertainty by commenters or objectors to the rule about when the statute of limitations starts to run. And it's unclear, as we learned a couple years ago, when these rules are considered promulgated, and that can trap a commenter because they might not know whether their comment's been addressed by the agency by the time the statute of limitations has run, because many of these statute of limitations are quite short, and there's uncertainty, as I say, about when they begin to run. One way to deal with this could be along the lines of what Ron just suggested. In the initial notice announcing the whole plan, including the effective date, the agency should speak to when the rule is deemed promulgated, and when a commenter can infer that there is not going to be any response. But to provide a firm date in the initial notice if the agency would rather not go to the burden of issuing a second notice later.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Nina. Bill, thanks for your patience.
I think F does that, right? I think F says when you issue your direct final rule, you will say if we don't receive any significant comments, it will take effect on this date. That will be in that notice, and that presumably would be 30 days for comment, 30 or 45 days after that, and that would be the deadline.
Can I just add quickly? I think the word promulgate needs to be in here. That's really the point. But yeah, that F does it if it includes some reference to promulgation of the rule, not just effective date.
I mean, I don't know. It seems effective date is you can't sue until the effective date. I mean, that's at least under the APA. And I mean, the statute of limitations goes from when you are affected by it, when you have injury, and you don't have injury until it takes effect. I don't know which statute says something is promulgated, but it doesn't take effect. I mean, there are some Clean Air Act things where it's not going to take effect for 4 years or something or other, and you could still sue in the interim. But I would leave that to wordsmithing. If the idea is that F tells you a drop dead date. All right, how we phrase the drop dead date is what another question. I leave that to the stylist persons now. And then I don't, you could put in just a statement that the agency may or might or should consider issuing a subsequent notice saying that it received no adverse comment, so that people know that the original deadline date is the one that's going to go into effect. But it would be optional with the agency to do that. And then I would take out at which time the agency will announce the rule's effective date, because you've already done that.
Okay, so I'm just going to try to conceptualize this all, and we'll just kind of leave it to the wordsmithers to sort through it. I'll get to Amy just 1 second, just before after I sort of say this quickly. So, what I'm hearing is that a reconceptualization of F that provides for time for the agency to receive comments, right, and some sort of deadline as to receiving comments, and also additional time for the agency to make a determination that there are no significant adverse comments, and ultimately to make that determination.
I don't think F talks about how long people have to make the comments. We deal with that later. That's in D.
Okay.
Not in F. All right. F is when the rule will take effect or promulgated, whatever. The idea is the drop dead date it's gonna go into effect.
Okay. So we have in 5, as is pointing out right now by Ben, sort of a set of deadlines. But let me go to Amy because I promise that she'll be able to speak now. But let's sort of keep 5 in mind as we think about this change.
Well, yeah, something to keep in mind too, since Miriam's not here, is that if an agency doesn't publish a document withdrawing the rule, the Federal Register is going to codify that rule on the effective date that was in the original DFR.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. So I will note that this is a recommendation about when an agency uses direct final rulemaking, what it should do. And then we have later sort of a description of the specifics of sort of any deadlines or timing that's is recommended here.
It speaks to the content of the rule document itself, whereas we talk about deadlines later.
Right. Okay, Ron.
Okay, so if Bill is correct that effective date means date on which it becomes official, not date on which you need to comply. So that if it says you need to comply as of 6 months from now, but it's in effect when it's then adopted, then the distinction I was articulating collapses, and the two are the same. Is that the way you understand it?
No, I mean, the effective date is the date that they have to be in compliance.
Okay, so the problem is that if they don't have to be in compliance for 3 months, but they've decided that the rule will stand and appeal is timely, you need to be able to do that well in advance of the effective date in that sense. There's a related problem I haven't mentioned, which is that a case that Nina and Daniel know very well stated that the rule is promulgated unless the agency has specified a different date by regulation. A couple DC Circuit cases have said that. What we really want is a provision that says if agencies use direct final rulemaking, they should issue a regulation saying that the rule is promulgated for purposes of appeal on the date when the agency determines that it will stand by the rule because there were no significant adverse comments. And that could be well after the date on which the Federal Register notice was issued. Now, if that's the promulgation date, then either by issuing a confirmation notice or by giving constructive notice in the original announcement, as I said before, now the party has sufficient time to say, okay, it's in effect, I can decide whether to appeal from it. But that would be a different recommendation, which staff suggested may not be germane, but I think the discussion is suggesting maybe it's germane enough the committee could consider it.
So I would kind of point out we're 1 hour in, and we do need to move forward. I think we have to make hard choices as to whether the things that we are discussing are something that we need to sort of engage in for purposes of this recommendation, because we just don't have a lot of time. So I just want to sort of help people keep that in mind. I don't want to cut conversation off. I don't think we have a clear sense as to what to do with 2, so I think we need to get that clear sense. But I just want us to be mindful of the limits of our time. Jeff.
I just want to say that if it's such a regulatory rule that there might be different compliance and implementation dates and all that, this probably shouldn't be done through direct final rulemaking.
Daniel.
Sorry, did you call me?
Yes, Daniel. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really concerned because it sounds like now we're proposing major changes to our direct final rulemaking guidance that we issued and that we've been using for quite a while. If we start talking about promulgation date, we're getting into requiring agencies to make legal determinations when the case law may be unsettled or statutes may say certain things, like for my agency. So I think that would be a big expansion of what the recommendations are. Effective date is easier. That's that's a specific date, but promulgation is specific to case law and statutes. And I just want to make sure, because it looks like it's still written that we have to issue yet another notice if we got no significant adverse comments, and that's not the current recommendation. And I would hope that we're not saying that agencies have to issue another notice, because I think that's how it's still written.
Okay. Jeremy.
Sure. On that latter point, I think you probably could solve it by just putting if applicable before F. The idea was that some agencies were issuing confirmation notices, just to capture the idea that if you plan to issue a confirmation notice, note that in the original notice, but obviously that wouldn't be applicable to all agencies. On the broader point that Ron and Nina are speaking to, you hinted at what staff had thought. I think that goes to judicial review of these things, and I would think that's outside of the scope of the proposal that the council approved. I think it goes a bit beyond public engagement. It actually goes to when you actually seek or can obtain, or when you have to obtain judicial review of an agency rule. Additionally, this actually did come up in the context of an earlier recommendation in 2021, clarifying statutory access to judicial review. There is a footnote in that recommendation that identifies this problem. One solution here, if you choose not to actually issue a specific recommendation, is at least to reflag the issue. I think ACUS can certainly consider it for a future project and future recommendation, but at least to note that there is a concern here, there is an issue. ACUS is aware of it, but not taking a stance at this time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nina.
Yeah, we dodged the issue in the Judicial Review Committee a couple of years ago, and it looks like we're going to dodge it again. I think the footnote is an okay solution, but I'm hopeful that we will take it up either today or at the plenary, which unfortunately for the first time in years I can't actually be at, because the judicial review problem is actually an artifact of the creation of the direct final rulemaking and interim final rulemaking processes. And if we want public engagement and we don't want these rules to be a trap for the unwary, I think we really do need to recommend that agencies try to fix it. And an important way for them to fix it is to be very clear about, as Ron says, when the rule is deemed final and promulgated, which is not necessarily the same date as effective date, but many statutes of limitations run from the date of promulgation, not from the effective date. So someone might not know what's happening to their comment until long after the effective date has run, and that's what happened in the Melise case.
Yeah, I just worry about engaging that topic right now, given the limits of time. But I do think it's and recognize it as an important one. Bill.
And to support not addressing that issue here is the statement that these are things that are unnecessary for public comment. If somebody wants to sue, all right, then it probably is not appropriate for direct final rulemaking in the first place. These are non-important rules that we're talking about. So I just thought this issue theoretically might come up, but I don't think it's worth trying to worry about at this point.
That was my point too.
So, okay, Ron, and then hopefully we'll be able to move on.
No, I was about to support where you're going, Bertrand.
Okay.
We should table it. But I was just saying the only reason we're talking about it is that some people don't understand the very elementary point that Bill and Jeff are saying, but nevertheless, we shouldn't pursue it now.
Okay. Okay, so this is the language we have. We want to sort of be mindful of Daniel's point about requiring or asking a subsequent notice, which would be a change for what we've recommended before. We don't want to do that inadvertently. Perhaps the language that Jeremy proposed with respect to F could be, if applicable, at the end of that. At the end of recommendation F, I believe, is where it would go. Jeremy, is that correct?
Or does it
G?
go after comments?
G.
G. Okay, after G. Okay.
So is it if applicable,
If
comma,
applicable.
at which time?
At which time the agency will announce the rule. Okay,
Or is it at the end?
Jeremy.
We can play with it. I was thinking actually at the beginning of this thing, but I think the idea is that you don't actually have to issue a confirmation notice, just that if you plan to, as part of your DFR process, issue a confirmation notice, make that known in the initial document.
Okay.
Yeah, and recommendation 5 makes clear that these are alternatives, and consistent with what Daniel Weiss is saying, you can do either, agencies can do either one. That's what we said in 95-4, and that's what this language is trying to convey.
Okay. Let's hopefully set a comment on 2 so we can move on to 3. Bill and Daniel.
I think you have to take out at which time the agency will announce the rule's effective date. I mean, we've already said they have set an effective date in the original rule. That's what F says. So they're not going to announce the rule's effective date in the subsequent thing. The effective date has already been set.
Okay.
So I mean,
yeah.
the fact that they're giving notice that, hey, just so you know, we didn't get any adverse comments. So what we said is going. We're not going to withdraw the rule.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that since we took out the alternatively.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can delete that language at the end of G. And then Daniel.
Yeah, I just think that 95-4 is clear that there are 2 different options, and this seems unclear to me. And I wouldn't want to be less clear than we are now that there's 2 options for what you can do, and one of them does not involve you publishing a new notice. If applicable seems unclear to me, because that leaves you to figure out whether it applies or not, whereas I think 95-4 right now is much clearer.
Okay. All right, so we'll play with that language with respect to 95-4 in light of Daniel's comments and make adjustments as appropriate. Mark.
How about specifies whether the agency will issue a subsequent notice?
Okay, so
that leaves to the agency to say when it does the direct final rule, we're not going to do a subsequent notice, or we will do a subsequent notice if they want to. Is that all right, Daniel? Makes it clear it's up to the agency to decide.
I'm just not sure what we're gaining by rewriting 95-4 here, because to me that was clear already.
Okay. All right, Mark.
Yeah, sorry. I assume we're moving on to 3 now. That's what I wanted to comment on.
That'd be great. Yes, let's
Good.
move on to 3. Recommendation.
Okay,
3.
and I don't want to wordsmith this issue, but I think there was agreement previously in one of the other sessions that we should make clear that there will be a comment period that extends beyond the time of the issuance of the proposed rule, so that it wouldn't be a single comment period for the DFR and the proposed rule. Just to make that clear somewhere. And again, I don't want to wordsmith this because I know our time is limited.
Okay, can you scroll down to 3, Ben? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it says they issue a companion proposed rule that serves as a notice of proposed rulemaking. And just, again, I think the ACUS staff can deal with this, but I think just making clear that there needs to be an additional period of time to comment if in fact they decide to proceed to a proposed rule.
Got it. Thanks, Mark. Ron.
I agree with that in spirit. I have a slightly different way of getting there.
Okay.
I would add at the end of the existing text of 3, in such proceedings, the agency should consider extending a reply period or allowing a reply period if needed for fair consideration of a comment.
Ron, can you just give it to me one more time? Thanks.
In such proceedings, the agency should consider providing a reply period, a period for reply comments, if needed for fair consideration of a comment. So that way you don't automatically have two, but if something came in on the last day, then you have a reply period as the conference has recommended in recommendation 2011 to paragraph 6, as you all know.
Okay. Okay, is there
Conference has endorsed reply periods.
all right. Is there a member of the committee that wants to propose this language addition to 3?
What does in such proceedings mean?
Whatever you want to make it mean, wordsmith it.
Which proceedings are we talking about? The first one or the
In the
second?
companion,
In the
notice of
companion.
comment proceeding.
Okay.
So refer to companion proposed rule proceedings.
If you say in such companion proceedings, I guess it's clear enough.
Is this consistent with the spirit of what you suggested, Mark, or is it different?
Well, I'm assuming if there are adverse comments that are received, that there ought to be an additional time to comment past that point. I mean, the only reason we would get into the proposed rulemaking is if there were adverse comments, and it seems to me we ought to automatically open the comment for an additional period of time. So I guess I would disagree with that.
Members of the committee, there are folks that want to sort of propose
I'm a little confused. You publish a proposed rule at the same time you do the direct final rule. You say in the proposed rule, but don't comment on this proposed rule because we may make the direct final rule final and not withdraw it. Only if we withdraw it will this be a proposed rule, but don't comment on it yet. Wait until later to see whether or not we withdraw the direct final rule. Then you can comment on this proposed rule. We won't publish a separate proposed rule. This will be the proposed rule, and everybody will have a full opportunity to comment on it then. That's my sense of what is supposed to happen here. But that's not correct. Please tell me what the correct thing is.
I guess what I would say, Bill, is that
Who's speaking here right here?
DFR and you think it's fine. You're not going to comment on it, and so and then somebody does submit an adverse comment which you think shouldn't have been taken, and so you'd like an opportunity to comment after the fact. It seems to me it makes sense to allow an additional comment period when there are adverse comments that you weren't aware were going to be coming forward. So that's my only point.
Well, I agree with that. I was just thinking, when is the comment period on the proposed rulemaking? I mean, if we're going to do a notice of proposed rulemaking, there's going to be an opportunity for comment. I assumed it would start, that time to start the comment would be when you withdrew the direct final rule.
But isn't there someone contesting the withdrawal of the direct final rule?
Bill, my point is, if that's the case, that should be fine, but I don't think it's clear from the number 3 that that's what would happen. That's all.
Okay.
And my point is that with respect to Ron, it seems to me that Ron is suggesting that people made comments on the proposed rulemaking during the period of time that the direct final rulemaking had not yet been finally decided was going to go into effect. I mean, I just thought there was going to be a whole new period of comment starting when the direct final rule was withdrawn. Is that not correct? Is that not correct?
No, that isn't correct, because that's not what a companion proposal is. By definition, they are done simultaneously, and that is a very common pattern. And so what I wanted to do is give a little discretion, because it looks as though at the end of the objection period, nobody's interested. The companion proceeding basically disappears. But the agency should have the option of saying, well, we got a debate there. We should have more input as per the usual assumptions of notice and comment rulemaking. So no, I was not thinking it would start then, but it may, as Mark says, fairness may require extending it beyond the initial period, because some people may have thought, oh, the agency says it's not controversial, I guess I won't submit my comments. And they may have been faked out by that. So I think we could deal with we revise my language and just say, consider providing an additional period for comments if needed for fair consideration of the matter.
And yeah, we'll focus less on the language here. Are there members of the committee that agree with the spirit of the proposal that's being offered by Ron? Lon?
I guess I'm really confused now. If there's a rule that's proposed, that's final, and there's a companion proposed rule, what's the difference between this and interim final rulemaking? Because it seems that's what you do there.
Response.
I thought just as people are thinking.
The difference is that interim final rulemaking rests on a different exemption. And so you don't invite it in the direct final rulemaking proceeding. You invite it in the companion proceeding, if at all.
I'm sorry, aren't they both under good cause? Maybe I
But
misunderstand.
one's under the unnecessary prong and one's under the impractical, contrary to public interest prong. Is that what you mean by the difference between the two?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in a direct final rule, you're proceeding under the unnecessary branch.
Right.
In which you think, oh, nobody wants to comment on this.
Right.
Well, then you issue a companion notice of rulemaking that says, if my prediction's wrong, here's a chance to comment. So your prediction's wrong. Somebody wanted to comment. And you say, fine. So we've commenced a notice and comment proceeding. The direct final rule died because of objections. The companion one lives. But now somebody who didn't comment during the initial period now wants to, now that he knows that there is a proceeding. So you give him a little extra time to do that.
Oh, so so on the second companion proceeding, you imagine that it gives them the opportunity to comment on the substance of the rule that they may not have done in the first period because they thought any sort of rulemaking would be unnecessary.
Right. They didn't think they would need to, but they trusted the agency mistakenly.
Lon?
I'm going to have to defer. I think these still look the same to me. I thought direct final rulemaking, you think it's unnecessary, and 99% of the time it is, and everything's fine. And every once in a while you make a mistake. You make a mistake, and you find out about it. You start notice and comment rulemaking. Isn't that the way it would normally work, or am I missing something? The reason I'm having trouble is that the tax rules are it's the tax statute that lays out some of this stuff very differently. I think Jeff knows about that. I'm going to get to that a little bit later on, but it seems we're putting in a process that's not necessary.
Jeff?
I mean, again, how do you say? How do you say? Well, wait a minute, you made a mistake. I have a significant comment, but I'm not going to tell you what that comment is. I mean, I think people are going to comment and say, here's why I think it's necessary. And you're going to get a substantive comment, and you make a decision to issue a notice and comment rulemaking. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jeff.
As I remember this from 1995, this was just EPA was the one that did this, and they were sort of trying to inoculate themselves from making a mistake with their direct final rulemaking and avoiding the loss of the 30 days that they would lose if they had to start over. So they would just have a simultaneous notice and comment rulemaking process on the same rule. Do we really want to urge agencies to consider doing that? I mean, it's if an agency feels like it needs to do that, they can do it, and then they can sort of figure out, how to do that notice and comment rulemaking as they would any notice and comment rulemaking. I think we should consider dropping this recommendation because it's just this, it's sort of a, pardon my French, sort of a bastardized version of direct final rulemaking in a way. I mean, or it's saying we don't really have confidence in our direct final rule, so we're going to do this, issue this companion rule. I don't think we need to get into that subject.
Okay. So the proposal is to just drop number 3, and to go with a process in which the DFR is withdrawn because there's a significant adverse comment, and then the agency proceeds directly to notice and comment rulemaking.
Yes.
Okay. Any objections to that? That would suggest deleting 3.
So,
Ron.
yeah, my hands up. So that would entail agreeing with the original 95-4 consultant who didn't think companion rules were a good idea at all. But contrary to his view, agencies, some agencies do it routinely. It is built into their practice. It's in their protocols. They do it all the time. And given that that's so, I think there's a case for saying, if that's your practice, here's the best practice ways of dealing with it.
Jeff, is that old hand or a new hand?
Old.
Okay, Mark.
Just want to agree with everything that Ron just said. Absolutely, that's right. People are doing it, so we better take note of that.
Okay.
I guess I would just jump in. This is in the Federal Register's document drafting handbook as a thing that agencies can do.
Bill.
I'd change should consider to may consider.
Okay.
Just to,
oh yeah,
just to
okay. So
keep
that
it in,
gives,
but make it say we're not saying you should do it, but
right.
something you can consider.
Okay.
And I take Ron's point in terms of the reply period. Right, I don't like the phraseology, and so maybe if Ben and other members of the style committee feel they understand what he's trying to get across, I would say I accept Ron's reply period in concept and leave it to the style people to try to figure out how to phrase it.
Fair. Okay, so we have in line 98. So let's kind of bring back to life 3 for now. And then we'll just add in not line 88, it may consider instead of it should consider. And then the spirit of Ron's proposal from 101 to 103 is to add a period for reply comments. And so we'll leave that.
If you want I don't think we should wordsmith, but if you want my most recent version of this, you'd strike the word reply and say providing an additional period for comment.
For comment, okay.
If needed for fair consideration of the rule.
Okay.
I like that
proposed rule.
Great. So additional period for comment. Okay, so are there any objections?
I don't want to debate it.
Yeah. Are there any objections to the 2 changes may and then the additional period of comment without focusing on the language in particular?
I'll take may as a small victory.
All right, there you go. We'll get wins here. Okay. Okay, let's move to 4 then. Daniel.
So I think 4 is a major change from 95-4 by adding D. So right now, 95-4 says a significant adverse comment is A, B, or C. And for D, agencies, in determining whether a significant adverse comment is sufficient to terminate a rulemaking, agencies should consider D without, and then we've now added, even if the agency disagrees, as sort of a message to agencies that you're doing this wrong. So I think this is problematic because A, B, or C is what direct final rulemaking is about. D is a consideration. Is this a serious issue that if you were in notice and comment rulemaking, you would respond to it, but you're not, because whatever serious issue was raised doesn't go to notice and comment rulemaking, doesn't explain why it's ineffective. It's just not relevant to the direct final rulemaking. So I would revert this back to what's in the 95-4 preamble and not add D as a new type of significant adverse comment.
Okay. So the proposal is to delete D. Ron.
So here's a place where I think Daniel and I will probably disagree. The language that I'm proposing here comes verbatim out of the 95-4 preamble up until the comma. Although I think what's after the comment, a comma is implicit in it. And the reason I thought it would be useful to get this in recommendation language, not preamble language, is that A, B, and C are pretty vague, and people may not really understand the idea behind direct final rulemaking, because you read it quickly and it just doesn't have the kind of teeth that makes you think, oh, is it or is not the kind of thing that meets the unnecessary exemption. D, on the other hand, that is the language that was in the preamble, has a little more substance to it, because you can ask yourself, if we received this comment in a regular notice of comment proceeding, would we just ignore it, or would we say something in reply? Now, the reason Daniel and I may disagree here is that in the Melise case, which we've been talking about along the margins, they received a comment which they thought, I think, was not germane. But if they'd received it in the regular notice of comment proceeding, I don't think they would have ignored it. They would have said, we got this comment, but we think it's not germane. It's not what this proceeding's about. If you want to file a petition for rulemaking, fine. If you want to go to the Office of Federal Register, fine. But we have it just would be too disruptive to consider it here. So we're not going to do it. I think that would be best practice. You would respond to it, not pay no attention. And so that, I think, is why you want something like D, because people can understand what kind of comments are serious enough to warrant a reply. And if they are serious enough, but the thrust is the agency shouldn't proceed with the rule, then the agency should so decide. But I think something that meets this threshold is one that suggests that you shouldn't have tried to do it through direct final rulemaking, which is not as clearly communicated in A, B, and C. So that's why I proposed it, although I don't think Daniel's going to second that suggestion.
Thanks, Ron. Nina.
We're not really proceeding with Robert's Rules of Order here. I just wanted to say I 100% agree with Ron. I think we really need to keep that language in for
Okay.
the reasons that he stated.
Okay. Daniel.
So I think it's important to read 95-4 because this is not what 95-4 says. 95-4 says a significant adverse comment is A, B, and C. And you should consider D, except for the even if the agency disagrees. That's not in there at all. But D is just a consideration. It's not defining what a significant adverse comment is. And that's the point, because you may get a very serious comment that if you're in notice and comment rulemaking, you would respond to, but you're in direct final rulemaking because the point that's being made is irrelevant. It can't be answered because the comment was unnecessary in the first place, because you're doing something so uncontroversial that what would be serious in notice and comment is completely outside the scope of direct final rulemaking. So I just want to be clear, this would be a change from what we have now. This is not what 95-4 says. And I think it would be very problematic because it undercuts the whole point of direct final rulemaking, which is that some substantive serious comment is just not something you can address in this rule. And that's why you did it through direct final rulemaking.
So I think we have sort of the views of the two sides on this. I'm just going to call a vote on this matter, unless Bill, you have something pertinent directly on this.
Well, I mean, I'm sympathetic to Daniel's idea that imagine you do a direct final rulemaking because a statute requires you to do something specific and all your regulation is doing is exactly what the statute requires you to do. There's no discretion whatsoever. And so you're going to do a direct final rulemaking. and somebody writes in a comment, says, you shouldn't do this because it's a bad idea for all sorts of reasons. And the agency's response is, nothing we can do about it, complain to Congress. And if you did, I take Daniel's point that, if it was indeed a comment that had been raised in a notice and comment rulemaking, you might have said that. You might have made a comment and said, hey, this is required by law. That's why we're not changing it. But whether that would require going through notice and comment in this circumstance, certainly not. Now, I'm not sure this language, if I were the agency, I wouldn't let this stand in the way of doing a direct final rulemaking here. So I support leaving this in, even though I agree with Daniel's comment that in the circumstance he's thinking of, it wouldn't be a significant adverse comment.
Okay. Yeah, my ordinary process is try to hash this out till we get to consensus, but we just can't do that now. So I forget, I remember raising a vote recently, but all those who would like to keep this language in, I guess, show of, or I guess we could do ayes, show of ayes or sound of ayes.
What's ayes? Oh, just say
Or
aye.
Say aye to keep it in.
Aye, but I don't think that
Aye.
works with
Okay,
the.
it doesn't work on Zoom. Okay, it's better than raising hands. Okay, raise your hands if you want to keep the language in. Who are members, only members of the committee can vote, of course. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all those who vote to delete the language. Or lower hands first, and then we'll go back. All those who favor deleting the language. Okay, so I've got a count of 6 to 4. So we'll keep the language, even though that's not the ideal setup, but we're going to keep the language for now. We'll hash it out further in the plenary. Going on to recommendation 5.
So just to confirm, we're keeping the language.
Keeping the language, yes, please.
I just want to say I'm very concerned about rushing through something that at least to my agency is a fundamental change to 95.4. And I don't think we've had enough discussion on this.
Yeah, I concur. I just don't know how to get through the rest of this recommendation without doing some sort of expediting the process, but I hear your concern.
Bertrand, I have a suggestion for 4 in addition to what we have.
Okay.
And it's the idea, and this is the language I had. If there is a significant adverse comment, a response by the agency to that comment is not a basis for avoiding a notice and comment rulemaking. Now, this isn't in lieu of what we have. This is in addition to what
This would be E. Would that be?
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Except it doesn't follow from if it, right? But maybe
Would
it's
it be
just part of
okay.
a follow on to D, a second sentence at the end of D.
Okay, great. Okay, so repeat that language again, Bill.
If there is a significant adverse comment, a response by the agency to that comment is not a basis for avoiding a notice and comment rulemaking. Because I have the sense that some people might think, well, they made this adverse comment, but we have an easy response to it, right? And here's our response to it. And so we're not going to do notice and comment rulemaking.
Right. Laura.
So I'm a fairly new government member, and I'm curious why we have to rush through this. It just seems like every meeting there are a lot of really substantive, meaty topics that are being discussed, and I'm just wondering, why do we have to get this out this session?
So we're in meeting 4. We have to go before the council with our recommendations after they've been approved by the committee. And then we have to prepare the recommendations for the plenary session, which is in early to mid-December. So that's how I understand the timeline. I was told that this would be the final meeting, but I'll let Ben and Jeremy chime in because they have more expertise on this matter.
Bertrand, allow me to
Oh,
follow up
Andy,
on
thank you.
that.
Thanks,
The
Andy.
schedule is such, Laura and everyone else, that we've got to get all of the recommendations to the council no later than the middle of next week in order to give the council enough time to read and prepare its own proposed amendments in time for its meeting, which is long scheduled for the 21st. So in my view, you don't have to finish today, but you got to finish tomorrow. We need some we need some time to process it and get it ready to send to council.
I guess I was actually asking sort of a slightly different question of why does an individual recommendation have to be done in a particular cycle as opposed to us saying, well, this one still needs more work and it getting picked to the mid-year plenary next year.
So yeah, point well taken. So the suggestion would be that we just do not feel like we can finish this recommendation by the time of the mid-year plenary. Can we hold it off to the end of to the June plenary, I guess is when it occurs.
Yeah, the committee is free, as we discussed, I think on the first meeting, to not propose this, not move it on to the council. But it does create scheduling and workload problems for us. We've got 4 recommendations in progress and planned for June. How we would handle all of that if the committee doesn't move this onto the council, I can't say for sure.
So I guess that is one of the things that, the committee can resolve. I mean, we have 23 minutes. We're clearly not going to make it through, possibly not even all the recommendations without, and I'm mindful of Daniel's comment. I'm concerned about rushing, which I think accords with Laura's concerns. At best, we could sort of schedule another meeting. Or at worst, we could try to put this off until the next plenary session, being mindful of the logjam that might create. But I will return to that point because I don't want to lose the little time that we have and return to that point at the end of this meeting. Give us a little time to discuss and based on where we are. And then, but let's try to get through at least a little bit more things in the last 13 minutes before we have that conversation, if that's okay. Okay, so I want to return to the proposal that Bill made of that additional addition to 4D. Are there any objections to that addition to 4D? Daniel.
I think this just puts even more weight on something that was not part of 95.4 as the definition of significant adverse comment. The more we add to it, the more it looks significant. And it looks like, I still don't understand why we're making such major changes to 95.4. I haven't heard much explanation why. We haven't debated it. Now we're sort of trying to explain it. And, rushing through by a 1 vote margin, a major change to 95.4 with just a few minutes of debate and then adding a sentence to try to clarify it. I just don't think that is what we should be doing.
Okay. What I'm going to do is it's gonna hold 95.4 recommendation 4D in abeyance, or just kind of hold off on any additional discussion of 4D. I will say that we will continue that discussion if we have a subsequent during a subsequent meeting, whether it be this week or after the plenary. But let me again move forward to 5. 5, and can we keep those comments? Yeah, thank you, in the comment box. And we'll return to that question of 4D and have more deliberation on that question in light of the concern about the major change it would impose. Can we go up to move to 5? Bill.
I would like to ask the agency representatives whether they agree with Miriam Vincent that they can't, get the papers out the door in 30 days. I mean, when I was doing rulemaking many, many years ago, and 30 days was plenty enough time for us to get all the paperwork through. So I just like to know from current people and agencies whether Miriam's right that you need a longer period of time in order to get the papers through the process for a rule it's not necessary to have comment.
Stephanie, as a government member.
We prefer government-ish.
Government-ish, sorry.
But no, I mean, I think we actually do need more than 30 days, even in this circumstance, because we require our board of directors to approve any of our rulemakings. And so I think in an instance like this, we would have to get it through management and through our board of directors to be published. So we usually do take at least 45 days.
Okay. So we could add the language 45 or 60 days here.
Well, I say if it's at least 30 days, that doesn't stop her from taking more days, right? My question is, are there agencies who 30 days is plenty enough time and therefore requiring at least 45 days would be a burden?
Comments on the 30 days versus at least 45 days language? Laura.
It would be hard, but I think under the right circumstances, we could get one out within 30 days. But 30 days is really pushing it.
Daniel?
Sorry, there's 230 days in this paragraph. Which one are we talking about?
I think we're talking about the second one. Is that correct, Bill? Or the first one? I thought you were talking about the second one, but
Whichever one Miriam was complaining about.
yeah.
This is just bad to jump. I think what's going on here is that if there's an automatic kind of effective date, then agencies and they do receive significant adverse comments, they might not be able to react in time to withdraw it. So it would only apply, I think, in the case of where they don't publish a subsequent notice. Because if you're publishing a subsequent notice, you have to take that action before the rule, goes into effect. Is that right?
Right, but I mean, all you have to do is publish a notice saying, we're withdrawing it. We're withdrawing the rule because it was a significant comment. So the question is, does that take, I mean, is there any agency that wants to do it in no more than 30 days? 30 days for comment, 30 days after the comment, that's a total of 60 days. But you have 30 days after the close of the comment period to put out that notice saying, oh, we received significant adverse comment, therefore we're withdrawing the effective date. And as I said, when I did it, that would not have been a problem, and we would have liked to have had it go into effect as soon as possible. But if today it takes longer than that for everybody, then I have no problem with extending it to 45 days. I just want to make it easier for the agency here.
Right. I mean, it says at least 30 days. Can't you take 45 days, or am I just misinterpreting 5 without consequences?
You can. The question is, does anybody want to do it in less than 45 days?
Right. Laura.
I agree with Bill's point that it says at least 30 days, and that at least gives agencies it puts it within the scope of the recommendation. If an agency can move fast enough, that they could do 30 days and still be following the recommendation. But the other part of that is, Bill, I think part of what you're asking is it really that hard to issue that notice? But a lot of that is the agency decision making over were these significant adverse comments, and there's a lot of discussion there, and then it's preparing the notice. It's not just tossing a one-pager withdrawal over to the Federal Register. It's actually a lot of deliberation and discussion as to whether or not that was a significant adverse comment worth withdrawing the rule.
But as I understand, the agency would have that additional time if it chose to take it under this rule.
Well, you have to specify in the original direct final rule. So you've got to plan ahead. Right. We as an agency cannot do 30 days. We need to do 45. Because if you publish and you say it's going to become effective in 30 days, it's going to become effective in 30 days. You can't later change and say, oh, we need 15 more.
Sure. Okay, so I guess the proposal here is whether we want to add any of the potential language or suggested language that Miriam has put forth in the comment box on the right. The one could be potential language would be add a second sentence that is perhaps responsive to the concern that agencies may need additional time, and that's in the second potential language in the comment box, the third paragraph of the comment box. Would that satisfy your concern, Laura, that you raised, or Stephanie, that you raised?
I'm fine with that additional language.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we sort of put it in the body right now and see as people read it next to the first sentence, whether it still fits comfortably. Any objections? Okay, so let's move forward to number 6. Any comments or feedback on 6? So I think it might make sense to stop here because we're not going to get through interim rulemaking and interim final rulemaking in the next 13 minutes, and I imagine our discussion will necessarily link some of the recommendations to each other. And so I guess the question for us is, we could schedule another meeting. Tomorrow is, of course, election day. At my school and maybe at your schools, there are no classes. There may not be school for your children, so you may have a schedule that differs. But the question is whether we should have another meeting this week, and if so, when. It needs to happen soon, according to Andy. And we see how far we get there, and if we still don't get through it, then we could sort of make a recommendation that we, proceed with this, continue to proceed with this, and of course, as Andy raised, you can raise amendments at the plenary, right? This won't be our final opportunity to review this. There will be public debate at the plenary on whatever recommendation we put forward. So even if the language is not agreeable now, there will be deliberation then, and we could perhaps get to a point at which we can come to agreeable language. So that's another thing to point out for those particularly concerned about our shortened discussion on recommendation 4. So I guess any sort of feedback on next meeting? Do we go to a 5th meeting? Are there any folks that object to a 5th meeting, or because we just have to have another meeting if we're going to get through the rest of this? Yes, Lon.
As an alternative, is it possible for us to do this by just turning around a new draft with written comments to the draft each day to see how far we can get?
Repeat that so we have written comments on the draft.
So for instance, maybe by an example, so Ben turns around a draft
right
at the end of today, circulates it, people make comments tomorrow morning, okay, and see how far we can get that way. We used to do that when we were drafting regulations. without having meetings because people couldn't schedule them.
Sure.
And you just turn around to draft every day and have comments every day. People have to understand that when they make a comment, they're going to have to accompany that with specific language so people can focus on that, the fix, and not just a general comment that this isn't working for me. I mean, that's the only way that's going to work. Try to do that each day this week and see how far we can get. And if we can't get there by, say, Friday, then, you know, punt till sometime in the future. And if we can, then there's your vote.
Okay. So I'm not, you know, I don't have deep experience with ACUS. I'm not familiar with the processes and what's permitted. Jeremy or Ben, do you have sort of thoughts as to whether that would be a permissible way to proceed?
If the committee wants that, we could facilitate it.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so
I say that because it fits in with people's schedules that way. You know, people can make a comment anytime during the day.
Sure. Thanks, Lon. So that's one suggestion, one proposal on the table. Jeff?
Me?
Yes, Jeff, please.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say I could do it at 10 a.m. every morning this week, except for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow afternoon I'm free, but anyway, it might be worth spending a few minutes on, although he's not here, Mr. Goodenough's question about whether we should whether we can make recommendations to OMB. I mean, it seems to me that the answer is pretty clear that we have in the past, and we've made recommendations to the president, and the statute specifically allows that. So that's a sort of a hanging question that maybe the committee can decide while we're here. But as I said, I'm happy to participate any morning this week except for tomorrow morning.
Okay. Okay. Daniel.
So I think as our sessions that keep continuing shows that there's a lot to talk about here. This is a change to decades worth of recommendations that, at least for our agency, have worked pretty well and have been pretty clear, but maybe could use some refinement and modernization. But I think that takes time, and I think we should take the time it takes. And having meetings that are out of cycle, where agencies may not even be there, like today, I don't know that all the agencies were there. And, you know, we may have made a major change to 95.4 by one vote at a meeting that was called pretty quickly with not all the agencies here. So if we're going to change something that's been around for decades, I think we should take the time to do it. We should set regular meetings when agencies can be there and think through how these changes to the recommendations are going to affect them. So I would ask that we take the time that it needs to get it right.
Yeah. So Daniel, your proposal would suggest that, you know, calling an additional meeting this week wouldn't be productive because we don't know if agencies can be there. It would be quickly called and without much time to prepare.
Right. And especially since these seem to be close calls, I would want as many agencies as possible to be there and to have the time to think through the implications of what this means for their agency and for other agencies' rulemaking.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel. Bill.
I was going to say that I thought we need to even today say yay or nay to recommendations 12 and 13 as a concept. Sort of what Jeff Lubbers, I think, was suggesting. And I don't think that could just be handled in comments and writing. So, but also, I'd be willing to switch my vote on whatever was D that Daniel really got upset about. If that would move this whole process forward a lot faster. I don't think it was that important that it would be worth derailing this process. So if anybody's open to that, I'm willing to reconsider my vote on I think it was 4D. 4D.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alex.
So I support what Daniel says. I'll also note that I think doing written comments in these circumstances is a little bit distinguishable from the normal regulation context, in that these comments, I presume, under the ACUS rules would be made public. So trying to clear comments every single day this week could be challenging from an agency perspective, certainly would be challenging from an OMB perspective. I'll just react on 12 and 13 and note that OMB also has sort of substantive concerns with those recommendations, separate from the question of ACUS authority to issue recommendations to the president and OMB, which I'm aware has been done historically. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Alex. Stephanie.
No, thank you. Much like Bill, I am content to switch my vote if that's necessary. I don't want to create I don't want to create unintended consequences for other agency folks or for ACUS or create additional work for this.
Right. Thanks, Stephanie. Ron. You're muted, Ron.
I would think the committee should take up the rest of the recommendation. We haven't talked at all about interim final rulemaking or about the paragraphs at the end, which I agree are quite important. I think you ought to do that. If time permits, you could revisit the issues under direct final rulemaking that they've gotten quite a bit of attention. It seems to me that the point on which Daniel and I were debating probably should be settled on the floor anyway.
Okay.
And so I don't think it matters a lot whether you leave it in or leave it out. Probably leave it in for the purpose of discussion.
Right.
But I think probably not discuss it, but rather say this is an item that the assembly will have to look at. We've debated it.
Right.
And I don't know that the debate within the committee is gonna resolve it. I think you should leave direct final rulemaking for whatever time remains after you've dealt with the rest of the recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. That's point well taken. Yes, there will be time. I mean, assuming this goes forward. So, I'm inclined to proceed with another meeting with great hesitation, recognizing that this is, in a sense, short notice for agency members. You said, Andy, it would have to happen tomorrow. Was that actually definitive tomorrow, or was that just an impression that needs to happen soon?
The latter, Bertrand, the latter.
Okay. So tomorrow's election day, so I'm really reluctant to proceed on election day. I'm actually reluctant to proceed the day after the election, honestly. So why don't we plan for a meeting on Thursday or Friday of this week to work through IFR and ideally the preamble. And then we will have something hopefully that we can submit to the plenary if we can get there, or we may decide not to go forward. Jeremy.
Bertrand, Thursday and Friday are the ABA Ad Law Section's annual administrative law conference.
Okay, that's not going to work.
I suspect that poses some conflicts.
Yeah, it poses a lot of conflicts. Okay, so Wednesday would have to be. It may be a very stressful time for all of us, but government must proceed, I suppose. So that's why I would suggest with respect to Wednesday as our next meeting. Daniel?
I just wanted to clarify in case I can't make the next meeting. The folks who said they would change their vote, did they change their vote? I just want to make sure that's clear for our meeting record.
Yeah. Okay. So Stephanie and Alex both said that you would change a vote. Is that correct? I'm trying to remember. So Stephanie, oh no, it was someone else as well. I forgot. So
I did.
Oh, Lon. So Stephanie,
Bill.
you would change your vote.
Bill and Stephanie.
Okay. So that is recorded for purposes of meeting notes and.
I mean, we could revisit it in the next meeting a little bit too, right? I mean,
Yeah, we're gonna try to go through IFR first and then come
Yeah.
back to DFR and the preamble. But yes, we could come back to 4D. I've kind of left it open as something that we would return to, time permitting. Okay, so expect a notice with the Zoom link for Wednesday morning from 10 to 12, in which we'll have our next meeting on this. I won't say final meeting because I have fear of jinxing us, but it will be our next meeting. So, onward we march. Thank you all for your engagement with this important topic. It's clearly is important to all of us, and I think the agencies that we ultimately make these recommendations to will appreciate the work that we've put into it. So I hope to see all of you on Wednesday. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Bertrand. Members, thank you all.